Let's start with you, Carlos, because I know that you're at the high school and you're in the trenches in a lot of ways. And what are you seeing now in regards to what is happening with this phenomenon that's sort of taking over?
Thank you for having me. My name is Carlos Franco. I work for the Greenwich Police Department. I work for the Special Victims Section. The Special Victims Section deals with all juvenile matters. We have 6 detectives assigned to the Special Victims Section, and I've been assigned to the school for the past 10 years. In that 10 years, evolutions have taken place from smoking, and then I'll go through the process really quick because there's other people that are experts on the field. At the high school level, I work with Dr. Termini. She is the Dean of Student Life at Greenwich High School. We work pretty much hand in hand together. It's a collaborative effort to educate the juvenile population at the high school. Several years back, we started noticing that the vapes that I have in front of me, kids were using outside and in the classroom, in the bathrooms. These large vapes were very prehistoric, let's call them for what it's worth now. A lot of the kids used to carry them, not easy to hide. They would keep it in their backpacks, easy to see, in their pockets. So we were able to determine that they were vaping. As evolution went on, they got smaller. It looks like an asthma treatment. From there, we went to the hookah pipes. And from that point, we started seeing this in 2 years. About 2 years, they introduced the Juul. They're called that's juuling, this Juul. And it comes with a cartridge, which different flavors, different types. And they sell for about $15 for 4. The Juul itself sells for about $50. They're ordering online. All you have to do is just click on a button that says I'm over the age of 18, put a credit card number, and they'll ship it to your house. These basically look like a USB drive. So some kids put it on their computers. Parents are not even aware that the kids are vaping. As kids get smarter and smarter throughout the years, they hack into the pods itself when they put THC marijuana within these pods. They break them in. They put the THC liquid marijuana, the waxy marijuana, the dabs as they call it, and then they smoke it with very little scent. They don't create a big smoke, cloud of smoke. It's just a very small, very minute scent, and a very minute smoke comes out of them. And from then we go to these right here. Looks like a pen, looks like a lipstick, an eyeliner, whatever you want to call it. Same thing as another vape. And once again, they hack into them and they put THC oils within. Anytime that the school confiscates a Juul or any pod, my job is to test it for any kind of contraband. Right now, the law basically states anyone under the age of 18 cannot possess any cigarettes, tobacco products, vapor products, or any type of nicotine delivering system. That, if you're over the age of 16, you're subject to a $50 fine. Under the age of 16, you're subject to be referred to court, juvenile court. There are other diversionary programs that we use. The progress that we have made in this school is we try to educate. Dr. Termini will elaborate on what we do at the school, at a school level. However, we do not, if I get one of these pods and anything like that, if a parent comes to pick it up, he is responsible for it. So he is providing a illegal substance to his person, to his student, to his child, I should say. So as you can see, the school takes a very proactive role on educating and confiscating and testing and preventing these kids from using the Juul. The Juul is very popular among teenagers. Go online, go on YouTube, Google how to hack a Juul. What is a Juul? And I'll go through the YouTube process, what they do and how they do it. I'll take some questions afterwards if anybody's interested. Thank you.
I'm Lorraine Termini. I'm the Dean of Student Life at Greenwich High School. Over the last, I would say, 3 years it started, I would say, when we really started seeing the vapes, but the last 2 years have been incredible. The number of students vaping, and they're very good at it. They find places to vape. They do it in the bathrooms. They do it outside in the school grounds. When we first started working with students, what we tried to do was a tiered approach. So if we caught a student with a vape, we'd bring them in, we'd call the parents, we'd have a discussion, and then there'd be a tiered approach in terms of discipline. What we found is that did not work. So a couple of weeks ago, Dr. Winters, the headmaster at Greenwich High School, sent a letter, an email to all students and parents saying, if you are caught with a vape, whether you're vaping or not, and you're caught with a vape, you will be suspended. That's a big deal. We really try not to suspend. Our job is to educate, as Carlos said, and we work very hard realizing that these are teenagers and they make mistakes. But we did not make a dent in the vaping at Greenwich High School, so we have started to suspend. If you're caught in the vicinity of a vape and you're not vaping, but you're caught in the vicinity of somebody vaping, we will call you and have a parent meeting because we are taking this very seriously. I will say, not that we have much data, but the last 2 weeks when we started this, I have seen less and less vaping. So I'm hoping that this more punitive approach works. It's not what we like to do, but we tried to do a more educational approach, did not work. It's so prevalent out there that there are now companies, and I spoke to one today, that actually make devices, and it looks like a fire alarm in your house, where you could, like a smoke detector, right, where you put it in the bathrooms, and it will measure the smoke. We don't see what's going on there, it's not a camera. It measures the smoke, and the administration, would get a immediate text, and then we would have to run to the bathroom to check it out. Very, very expensive. We are thinking about it, at least piloting, because it's such a serious problem, but it's very, very expensive. So that's something we're looking into. But that just shows you how prevalent it is that there are companies doing this out there. So we really, as I said, we try and be proactive, but unfortunately, it is a major problem that we are seeing. And anytime that Carlos and I meet with any group of parents, any parent meetings, we bring this up because we really need the support of parents working with us because kids are buying them. They're getting the money from you guys. So we need to work and partner together to really deal with this issue. And I'll be honest with you, I've been at that high school a very long time. I won't tell you how many years. But I have never seen, even when cigarettes were popular, and they were for a long time, I have never seen the number of kids vaping as compared to cigarette smoking. So the number of vaping it's incredible.
And these alone are $50. The jewel itself is $50. So if a child is purchasing this, where is he getting the $50 from?
He's getting from somewhere at age 14, 13. I've done studies with other SROs throughout the state at middle schools. They're coming out. So parents must be aware that they have to take a role in this to help us out. They need to take an active role on these things.
I think, too, one of the big misconceptions is how dangerous it really is. Because I know like when I was in high school, people did smoke, as you said. But it's like you would smoke one cigarette, and then you would maybe, 4 hours later have another one. But people are nursing this thing all day. And there was a situation in New Canaan where somebody almost passed away because the nicotine was so intense that they almost overdosed from the nicotine from this. So it is a completely different ballgame than it used to be with cigarette smoking. So how dangerous is it? I guess that takes me to what you're going to talk about and your expertise as to how dangerous it really is and what we're seeing and what's really in this.
Thank you, Kyle. My name is Dr. Paul Sygall. Just a little bit about me real quick. I'm a board-certified anesthesiologist and interventional pain management consultant over at Greenwich Hospital. Just to tell you guys about me a little bit, I studied at the U, but back in the late 80s and early 90s when the cocaine cowboys and the Overtown riots were there was nothing I did not see, nothing I did not get my hands dirty with, for lack of a better word. Traveled up to Sloan Kettering to finish a fellowship in that interventional pain management. And then 18 years ago, got an offer I could not refuse to join the guys out here, and I've been here for the last 18 years. And kind of what you've already heard from some of my colleagues on the panel, this started out something small. And much like that little thread on the sweater, you pull it, and the next thing you know, the whole thing's unraveling. Well, that's what it really has become. The blossom that we have seen has just been tremendous. And that's really what I'm here to talk about a little bit. So to dive right into it, what are we talking about? Well, obviously, we're talking about vaping. We're talking about marijuana, and to some degree, not necessarily tonight, but to some degree, we're talking about opioids as well. And the reason why we're lopping all these things together is because it really is a very slippery slope. There's an old saying that, yes, not everyone that smokes marijuana or cigarettes or vapes or whatever it may be is going to end up as a heroin addict on the street. But I can assure you that every single heroin addict on the street started out smoking or using marijuana, or nowadays, was vaping. So let's get right into it. What is vaping? And you'll pardon me again for the logistics here. I'll try to do this as best I can. But, you know, it really refers to an electronic nicotine delivery system, or an ENDS. It was introduced in the mid-2000s. 2004 in particular was where the real crux occurred in the United States. And it was used as a substitute for cigarettes. Doctors, in fact, loved this. They thought, hey, it's great. We can get rid of the tobacco. In and of itself, it does not contain tobacco, but it does contain the active medication or drug, if you will, nicotine, and that may actually come from tobacco leaves themselves. A vape device basically has three main ingredients. It has propylene glycol, which is similar to antifreeze, and ethylene glycol, if you will, which is the vehicle. It's the delivery agent. Nicotine, which is the drug itself, and then the most important thing is the flavor. We want to make it interesting. So cotton candy, bubble gum, you name it. That's one of the other, as Carlos is showing you, you know, you chewing spearmint gum, you know, that's what it smells like. How do they work? For those of you that are not familiar, very, very similar to the device that Carlos has right here. The way it works is it works very on pressure. What happens is you inhale, and by inhaling you cause negative pressure to occur with this mechanical device, and a sensor feels that drop in pressure and immediately ignite or sets on a heater, which then heats up the propylene glycol and nicotine, creating a vapor, and you inhale it. Very simple process. Some of them get fancy with electronic lights at the end. Nowadays, they hide the lights because, you know what? People don't want to know what you're actually doing. You're just chewing on your pen. You're taking that burst of that inhaler, as far as people can tell from afar. So why is this a concern? Well, ENDS use among youth is increasing dramatically. And as Dr. Termini and Carlos have already indicated, it is astounding as to what the numbers are. From the CDC itself, from 2011 to 2012, okay, about, again, 5-6 years ago, among United States age students between grades 6 and 12, upwards of 1.8 million students had reported trying a vape. That actually, from 2011 to 2012, there was a double in the percentage of students that actually had used it for the first time, and more importantly, doubled from 1.1 to 2.1% in terms of the students that reported continual use. Well, people are saying maybe not so bad, huh? Well, guess what? By 2015, the numbers dramatically increased. Again, 25% of all high school students have reported trying an ENDS device. This was only a year and a half ago, folks, almost 2 years ago. 25%. Just look to your left and right, look behind you, and look in front of you. One of those people would have already had tried using a device. 16% of all high school students had ongoing use. More than 3 million students across the United States. So these numbers are dramatically increasing. And there are some reasons to that, and I'll get to that in a second. So what? Who cares, right? Well, the reason we care is because there is a lack of standardization. There is no overseeing body, no organization, the FDA, nothing, that actually looks at this and says, these are the things you must adhere to. So there's not a single device. There's not a single chemical. It's all, you know, basically willy-nilly in terms of the regulations surrounding this. As a result, there's no way to really track it or oversee it, and most importantly, there's no way to ensure quality, for that matter. There are technical flaws. Obviously, these cartridges are made very cheaply overseas. There can be leaks, there can be problems. We'll talk more about that. But that leads to variable delivery, and more importantly, the nicotine content as a result. Nobody knows exactly what's in there. Why is this a problem? Well, again, initial reports, as I said, we embraced this as physicians initially because this was a way to remove that tobacco. You know, just like the Nicoderm patch, we're giving the patients the medication, the drug, to kind of wean them off, but we're not exposing them to the carcinogens. Not necessarily, folks. You know, the fact of the matter is there is the placebo effect. If I'm sitting there as a physician and I tell you, you know what, bud, this is going to work, more often than not, you're going to believe me. So there definitely is a placebo effect that's helping this. Along those same lines, more than $6 billion a year industry. People are making money off this stuff, folks. You know for sure it's going to be publicized. Ever walk into any of the card stores or stationery stores, even in town, and guess what? Those vape devices are eye level for those teenagers, okay? Everyone that's here, it's there. You can see it. So we're actually finding now, years later, a decade later, that we're actually seeing the paradoxical effect. We're seeing that the nicotine addiction is just as strong, and it's actually potentially promoting additional addictions as well. The biggest concern we have, though, is the safety concerns, and that's really the big point in my talk here tonight. It's the heating and the inhaling of these flavors and chemosensory agents. We don't really know what they are. They're toxins, and that's going to be a problem. So what are some of these toxic contaminants? Well, there they are, folks. Formaldehyde, acetaldehyde, other heavy metals, lead, toluene, obviously the nicotine. All of these are known carcinogens, no questions asked. And although e-cigarette vapor, again, doesn't contain that tar that we all know is associated with lung cancers, etc., it's all the other carcinogens and the toxic chemicals that we're inhaling, as well as the nanoparticles of these heavy metals that we're inhaling because of the vaporization. That is the problem. What are the effects of nicotine? Well, ironically, it's a stimulant agonist. It works on nicotine receptors in the body. It's highly addictive, and it's a complex agent. It's still a mystery. We really don't even know exactly everything nicotine does to us. What we do know is that in low doses, it'll stimulate you, but ironically, in high doses, it actually has a sedative effect. In terms of memory and alertness, yep, low doses, no question. It can perk you up. But then with high or continued use, it actually has that sedative effect again. That sense of well-being that you get after you use it initially is quickly replaced by a sense of anxiety with prolonged use. Yes, it'll decrease your appetite and it'll increase metabolism, but guess what, folks? It also increases phlegm and saliva production. Most important of all of these things is that your tone, your cardiovascular tone and your blood pressure increase as a direct result. And that has certain obvious negative and dilatory effects, which we'll talk about again momentarily. If you were to overdose, as Kyle was mentioning earlier in New Canaan, there was that episode, what happens? Well, obviously you become nauseated, you become pale, you start to sweat, you start to shake and get a little, high-wired, for lack of a better word. Eventually it would lead to dizziness, muscle fasciculations or tremors, seizures, and unfortunately eventually death. This isn't, simple stuff, folks. This is real, and this is how it happens. What about the effects of physically vaping? What about those? I mean, we're talking about the drug, but what about the actual effects of the vaping itself? Well, obviously there's irritation of the mucosa of the mouth and the throat. You'll get that dryness and that ulceration. You can get a prolonged dry cough that just never seems to want to go away. And of course, there are the added effects of the dizziness and the headaches that are just very similar to the nicotine effects. The long-term effects, unfortunately, we really don't know. I mean, as we said, this was only introduced to the United States 13 years ago. So we don't even really know what the long-term outcomes are going to be from vaping. Let's not forget about the most obvious thing as well. As I said earlier, there's no oversight to these things. And that bottom picture right over here, I don't know how clear you can see it, but for those of you that may remember last year on New Year's Eve, all of the news channels carried it because the guy was right in Grand Central, and all of a sudden his pants started blowing up like a 4th of July fireworks display. He had a vape in his pants, and the thing just decided to explode. Which leads to the next thing, which is what Officer Franco was talking about, and that is hash and honey oil. This is the problem, is because once you start vaping, it's very easy to get on YouTube and doctor these devices and switch the chemicals. It doesn't have to be nicotine anymore. It can be pot, it can be marijuana, or as it's come to be known, hash or honey oil. The thing about this is that, again, it's upwards of 60 to 90% of the active component that we find in marijuana it's being basically diluted down and put into these devices. And like I said, it smells like you just had some spearmint gum on your breath. That's it. The problem with that is what we're really talking about, and that is marijuana itself. And what is marijuana? Well, say that 5 times fast. Tetrahydrocannabinol. Okay, that's the active ingredient in it. Okay, it is what produces that high feeling, and it changes your behaviors and perceptions. There's no question about it. It slows you down. Everything starts to make, seem slower and easier and no problem at all. It decreases your motivation, shortens your attention span, but ironically, again, just like nicotine, in higher doses, paradoxically, you become more anxious and paranoia tends to set in. The brain and heart effects, this is what we're talking about, ironically, same thing with nicotine. In terms of the brain, it will activate multiple hormones in the body. Marijuana will affect your memory and your cognitive functioning. It also turns on a primal survival reward mechanism, which is a bad thing. It makes you want more of it. You think inherently that this is a good thing, when in actuality it's not. You are at an increased risk of multiple psychoses, such as schizophrenia and depression. And ironically, Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center last year in 2016 found that you are 5 times more likely to suffer from a heart attack within an hour of smoking marijuana than if you hadn't been. And again, that comes back to that increase in cardiovascular tone and blood pressure. In terms of your immune system and reproductive systems, it will decrease your T cell production, which decreases your ability to fight off viruses, increases your ability to catch respiratory problems or respiratory infections. In terms of prenatal exposure, if mom is smoking, guess what? Low birth weight, low birth height. If dad is smoking, ironically increased risk of SIDS. Excuse me. But even beyond, if you're exposed through breast milk, you have decreased motor development by year one. By the age of 1. Now, granted, there are some reports, and I will not deny them, that it does help with nausea associated with chemotherapeutic agents. It helps with the spasticity associated with MS and ALS. And you know what, folks? If God forbid you have cancer, MS, or ALS, you have more important things to worry about. But that's not what the issue is here. It really comes down to this final hit. And again, I just have to read this. The whole concept is chasing the dragon. And it starts when you have that first high. The world is peaceful and everything is perfect and you're numb. Best way possible. But soon it wears off, fast, and your mind races. You're pulled out of that dream world. You crave it more and more, wanting to feel the same way you did on that first high. So you go to the dealer and you buy the same amount you did the first time and smoke it, and it still feels good, but not quite as good. You go and you buy more, and closer, but not quite there. So you're stuck and you don't know what to do. You want to go back to that little dream world and stay there forever, but your body's already developing a tolerance. You panic. You use all your money to buy more and more and more, but still, it's not the same as that first time. You realize you have no more money, so you want to start selling your things, pawning whatever's yours, and nothing compares to what you had that first magical time. So now you're broke, you own nothing, and you don't care. All you care about is getting back to that first high. So you start stealing and doing favors and whatever gets that money for that attempt. And your life becomes a living hell in search of a repeat of that first high. That's chasing the dragon. That quote was from a teenager that's part of a series that the FBI and DEA collaborated on, and it's literally called Chasing the Dragon. If you have about an hour of time with nothing else to do, just YouTube that. YouTube that video. It is really powerful, and it just changes your whole concept when you realize that this is really affecting us, folks. We're not going to get into that right now, but in general, it happens. It happens every single day. And just like that sweater I alluded to at the beginning of this talk, you pull that thread and you'd be surprised at how quickly everything unravels. It is a slippery slope, and all it takes is that first drag. And the most important thing, obviously, is that you're even thinking about doing this. You're not thinking at all. I'll answer questions again at the end as well.
Getting back to the marijuana issue. Everybody's under the misconception that marijuana is legal in the state of Connecticut. It is not. It is decriminalized. Marijuana is decriminalized in the state of Connecticut. So if you're a juvenile and you're caught with marijuana, you will be referred to a juvenile court. Over the age of 18 and up, depending on the amount you have, you can receive a citation. Part of that citation will be losing your license. It will be a fine, and it will be confiscated as evidence. And the fines keep going up, $250, $500, and so on. But if you're operating a motor vehicle and we smell marijuana, you could be charged with DWI, driving under the influence of alcohol and or drugs. So it is illegal. It's an illegal substance still in the state of Connecticut.
We do confiscate a vape. Our job is to, I give it to Carl as he tests it, as he said. If we do find that there's THC, marijuana in it, obviously the consequence gets higher for the students. So we're also, looking for not only the vaping, but what's inside those jewels. And one of the things that we do have, and I'm going to turn this over to Dennis because Dennis works with us at Greenwich High School as well. And when we do have a student who is found with THC or marijuana, we're very lucky to have Dennis from Liberation in the school that we could refer kids to, and we do on a regular basis. So.
Thank you, Lorraine. I'd like to just say that, Liberation Programs has a multiple number of sites. We go from Bridgeport, where we treat about 700 people over the age of 18 that are opiate addicted or that have issues with alcohol. They are treated often with methadone, which is actually a medicine to use to stop the cravings and to help them to regain their life back. We also have a program in Stamford with 300 people, and they also are often on methadone for opiate abuse. We have an inpatient program, and my supervisor who's here tonight, Maggie, also is in charge of a program called FIR. It's families in recovery, where we have women who have children up to the age 10, and they have an opportunity to continue in their recovery with their children, and also to find work, to get skill training, etc. That's in Norwalk. About 3 years ago, our agency approached Lorraine and the high school about having us come in because of the opiate epidemic that was hitting so many communities and towns. And so they were wonderful to say, yes, we'll give you an office at the high school. And so I began to see students, often, as you heard, from situations that are happening at the school, and also from social workers and other counselors who understand that some of the behavioral issues that are ongoing with some students have a base in their substance use. So I try to work with them sometimes in terms of treatment, which means drug testing, sometimes in terms of education and working with the others in the school to help them change their mindset and their behaviors. As you can hear tonight, the attitude is often, it's harmless. Vaping is less harmful than cigarettes, which is absolutely not true. Nicotine as a drug is as addictive or more addictive than cocaine or heroin in the brain and in the body. So it does not take, as the doctor said, more than one puff. The delivery systems are changing, and we're knowing now that the Juul, which is the most popular one that Carlos mentioned, actually has a different type of nicotine. It's called nicotine salts, derived from the tobacco plant. The other devices had what was called free-base nicotine. Both are diluted in the process of making it. And what's happening with the Juul and the company out in California that makes it is that they want to have that first puff equivalent to a cigarette. So their idea isn't that they're going to change people to only use the Juul because they never smoke cigarettes. They want people to switch over. And also those who have never tried cigarettes to begin to have the same dependency that the cigarettes had. And I'm beginning to see this in students. One student I'm working with is only 17 years old. He was smoking a pack a day of cigarettes. He decided that the Juul would be a better bet. It's cheaper, right? He takes a pod. He does 3 pods a day. That's 3 packs of cigarettes a day of nicotine. Has no idea how much he's getting in every puff, as any user doesn't know. And he's literally addicted more so than ever to the nicotine. And it's hard for him to understand why that is, because his body and his mind are craving it more and more. You know, addiction is basically saying to the person, you know, I really need this right now, and I'm going to find some way to do it and get it. And that's really a good description of when a person is an addict. And I think a lot of the students we're seeing that might be just using it socially once in a while don't realize that the nicotine is going to cause an addiction very quickly. We're also seeing students after high school going to college, and what they're doing is they're now conditioned by the vape, and they're going into hookahs. And hookah is a whole nother world, using shisha, which is a mixture of tobacco and other organic chemicals, burned on charcoal through water. And they're thinking that it's safer, it's better, and they're actually experiencing more distress, some of the college students, because of the overdosing of the amount of nicotine that hookah is going to provide in 45 minutes, not just in a few puffs. So we're seeing a kind of transition and a growth of disturbing addiction going on. And we do know that, as the doctor said, in the brain, some of the things that the nicotine causes as it gets increased more and more are actually causing some of the receptors to be available to other drugs, especially cocaine. So we're looking at that happening as well over the period of time. And cocaine is also reemerging in some of the states. And where it had died down, it's coming about again, and we're not quite sure why. But there will be a link, I think, to what's happening with e-cigarettes as time goes on. So my job is really to work with the students, to work with the faculty, and to really help the families understand. And that's why a lot of the parents are here. You're here to really know what is happening and what can I do. We've put together some packets in your seat, some of the things the doctor has shown, especially how the symptoms of nicotine poisoning. Another, like Kyle, a mother in Darien, came up to me after one of my presentations there to the youth and said, you know, my son overdosed on nicotine this week. They had to bring him to the hospital. And it was his first time really trying the Juul. So he had no idea how much to take, what was happening until it was too late. Fortunately, you know, there was no permanent damage. But I go also to the middle schools to present at the 6th and 8th grade in Greenwich, and we're seeing a lot of the students, again, you know, hearing about it, seeing it, wondering what it's like, beginning to want to try it from an older brother, an older person. And when they get to high school, oftentimes they are ready to buy one if they haven't gotten one already. And the older students who have been doing it are very happy to make some money. Carlos said it's only $50, but they'll sell them for a little bit more, so they don't have to worry about the parents and the credit cards and all of that. And it's really an operation, it's a business for some students, but it's worse, it's really an addiction for all those who are involved in it. Thank you.
What is the charge if you find one and it's marijuana related? Right.
That's if it's juvenile under the age of 18, it's could be a referral to the juvenile justice system, and or we have other diversionary programs that we use in town to educate. What we're trying to do is keep kids away from the juvenile justice system. We want to educate. We have to applaud Greenwich High School. They take a proactive approach when they see an issue, they deal with it, and they grab every single resource that they can to help the student. Our goal at the school, at the special victim section, is to educate. Educate them other than the pathway to court. We have a lot of discretion in the police department when it comes to juveniles. Over the age of 18, you're going to get a ticket, you're going to get fined, and your license will be suspended by the Department of Motor Vehicles. That's part of the punishment to decriminalize. Like Dr. Termini said, we take a proactive approach. And Lana, I want her to discuss, we have the kids themselves are turning themselves, their friends, in.
What's been happening, which is a really, I think, a positive, we have something called anonymous alerts at Greenwich High School. So anybody, students, parents, community members, it's on our website and kids can download it for free, can send us anonymously any information or any concern. So we get bullying complaints and we get kids who may want to hurt themselves. I think, quite frankly, it saved a number of lives over the last 3 years. Over the weekends and at night when we get them. But kids are now using those to give us names of students who are vaping and who are selling vapes. And we take every anonymous alert and we investigate every single one of them. And it really has been very helpful. And kids have also been coming to us privately and saying, we want to remain anonymous, but here's what's going on. And that's where we get a lot of our information. And I think I applaud the kids because they know it's bad. They're afraid for their friends, they really are, and they are coming forward. So we have a good group of kids who do speak up and do help us help other kids.
Dr. Sygall, you spoke a little bit about the regulations. Is there anything in place, or do you see anything in place that's coming down the line that's going to help this?
No. As we said, you know, the biggest thing that's driving this, in essence, is just the money that's involved. I mean, you look at those stats, more than $6 billion last year alone, in 2016 alone. It's an industry. And they've got enough individuals and enough places to keep it that way, unregulated for at least the near future.
Well, the advertising makes you crazy because it's so sexy and it's so team-based and it's so youth-dominated, and it makes you want to go ape when you see something like that and reaching that generation. So there's got to be something that can stop that somewhere along the way, you would think.
Most of the vapes are actually being made by tobacco companies. They know that this is the way to get to you as a youth, or to have someone that's been a smoker to turn over and go to e-cigarette, so they can continue to keep you addicted to the nicotine.
One of the first ones that came out was Blue. Blue was one of the first ones that you saw the guy walking on a beach. It's going to help me quit smoking. Blue. It's beautiful. It lights up. And who are you advertising to? It's just like on cigarettes. They're advertising to juveniles. Does that, it's pretty. It's pink. It looks great. Does it look like a cigarette or no? So that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to avoid being the obvious. This is the obvious. Now we're going to this.
this is not obvious, as Dennis will show right there, they charge it on their computers. Different names, hookah happiness. So who are they advertising to?
Right. When it first came out, it did look like a cigarette. Remember that? Like 6 years ago, it looked just like a cigarette, but it was ceramic. And so suddenly that was not socially acceptable, so it changed to this whole model. So it's the whole thing's ridiculous. Thank you very much. One plug for Dennis. Dennis I've known for a long time, and he is an expert in the field when it comes to any type of addiction that anyone might be facing. So we have a nice crowd here tonight, a nice crowd of teens. If you have friends that you know that are going through it, if you have family members that are going through it, Dennis is a local resource that is unbelievably amazing, and as well as all of you guys are as well. But Dennis, I've known for a long time, and when it comes to teens and youth, he's your go-to guy if you need help or if you know somebody who does. So just keep that in mind. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for being a part of it. Really appreciate it.